The Zephyrian research vessel Gentle Current drifted silently through the void of space, its crystalline hull reflecting the distant starlight like a prism. Commander Lyrith pressed her four-fingered hand against the smooth control surface, her large violet eyes studying the readings with growing concern. The ship's bioluminescent panels pulsed in soft blues and greens, indicating all systems were functioning normally. Yet something felt terribly wrong. "Status report," she chirped in the melodic language of her people, her voice carrying the subtle harmonics that conveyed both authority and worry. "All systems optimal, Commander," replied Navigator Kethel from his position at the sensory array. His elongated form curved gracefully over the controls, tentacle-like appendages dancing across the interface with practiced ease. "The quantum resonance chambers are maintaining perfect stability, and our bio-neural networks show no signs of strain." Lyrith's concern deepened. The Zephyrians were a peaceful species, evolved from aquatic creatures on a world where violence was virtually unknown. Their technology was based on harmony and biological integration rather than the crude mechanical systems other species employed. They had been conducting a routine survey of this remote star system when their long-range sensors had detected something that chilled her to her core. "Show me the readings again," she requested, her voice taking on the lower tones that indicated serious contemplation. The main display shimmered to life, showing a three-dimensional representation of local space. Scattered throughout the system were the unmistakable energy signatures of conflict, weapons discharges, debris clouds, and the electromagnetic screams of dying ships painted a picture of devastating warfare. "The Korthak Empire has pushed further than we anticipated," observed Science Officer Venta, her smaller form hunched over a bioanalytical station. "Their expansion has accelerated beyond all predictions. At this rate, they will reach the outer colonies within 2 cycles. The Korthak were everything the Zephyrians were not. A militaristic species that had carved out a brutal empire through conquest and subjugation. They viewed peaceful races like the Zephyrians as nothing more than resources to be harvested. Their ships were angular monstrosities of metal and plasma, designed solely for destruction. We must warn the Confederation," Lyrith decided. "Signal the nearest outpost and request immediate—" Her words were cut short as proximity alarms began to sing throughout the ship. The harmonious tones that normally indicated approaching objects now carried an urgent discord that made every Zephyrian on board instinctively seek shelter. "3 ships approaching from the asteroid field," Kethel reported, his tentacles moving frantically across his controls. "Configuration matches Korthak hunter-killers. They've detected us." On the display, 3 wedge-shaped vessels emerged from behind a massive asteroid, their hulls scarred and blackened from countless battles. Weapon ports glowed with ominous energy as they adjusted course to intercept the Zephyrian ship. "Evasive maneuvers," Lyrith ordered, though she knew it was futile. The Gentle Current was a research vessel, built for exploration and scientific study, not combat. Its organic curves and bio-integrated systems made it beautiful, but utterly defenseless against military craft. The ship responded sluggishly to Kethel's commands, turning away from the approaching predators. But the Korthak ships were faster, closing the distance with predatory efficiency. Warning lights began flashing as targeting systems locked onto the Zephyrian vessel. "They're powering weapons," Venta reported, her voice tight with fear. "Plasma cannons and kinetic accelerators. We cannot survive a direct assault." Lyrith's mind raced through their options. They could surrender, but the Korthak were known to take prisoners only when it served their purposes. More likely they would strip the ship of anything valuable and leave the crew to die in the void. Running was impossible given their speed disadvantage. That left only one choice. "Kethel, prepare an emergency transmission," she commanded. "Maximum power all frequencies. Commander?" The navigator's confusion colored his voice with higher harmonics. "A distress signal. Perhaps someone will hear it and warn the Confederation about the Korthak presence here." Her crew exchanged glances, understanding the futility of the gesture but recognizing the wisdom in it. If they were going to die, at least their death might serve some purpose. Kethel's tentacles danced across the communication array, channeling power from the ship's bio-neural cores into the transmission systems. The organic components of the Ship began to glow more brightly as energy flowed through living conduits. Signal ready, Commander. All frequencies, maximum dispersal pattern. Transmit, Lyrith ordered. The gentle current pulsed with brilliant light as it broadcast its desperate plea into the void. The message was simple, transmitted in the common, trade language used throughout this sector of the galaxy. This is the Zephyrian research vessel Gentle Current. We are under attack by Korthak forces. Any ships in the area, please respond. Please help us. The Korthak ships responded to the transmission by accelerating their approach. Plasma fire lanced across space, the first shots deliberately missing to demonstrate their overwhelming firepower. The message was clear: surrender or be destroyed. Commander, Vinita said quietly, perhaps we should consider... Her words were interrupted by a new sound from the communications array, a response to their distress call, though not in any language they recognized. The voice that came through the speakers was harsh and guttural, filled with strange clicking sounds and aggressive tones that made the Zephyrians' sensitive hearing recoil. Unknown vessel, this is the Terran Navy destroyer Vengeance. We've received your distress call. Hold your position. Help is on the way. The bridge fell silent except for the gentle humming of biosystems. None of them had heard of Terrans before, and the name of their ship sent chills through the peaceful crew. What kind of beings named their vessels after concepts of retribution? On the display, the Korthak ships had slowed their approach, clearly having intercepted the same transmission. Their formation shifted into a defensive pattern, weapons still trained on the Gentle Current but no longer advancing. New contacts on long-range sensors, Kethil reported, his voice barely above a whisper. 4 ships approaching at high velocity, configuration unknown. The rescue was coming, but Lyrith found herself wondering if they had simply exchanged one predator for another. In the vast darkness of space, her small ship waited to discover what manner of beings answered distress calls in this remote corner of the galaxy. The 4 ships that emerged from hyperspace were unlike anything in the known databases. Commander Lyrith studied them through the Gentle Current sensors, her violet eyes wide with fascination and terror. These Terran vessels were brutal in their simplicity, angular blocks of armored metal bristling with weapon systems. They moved with predatory grace despite their size, like aquatic hunters from her homeworld's deepest trenches. By the flowing depths, whispered Navigator Kethil, his tentacles trembling as he processed the sensor data. Those ships are massive. Each one is 3 times the size of a Korthak hunter-killer. The lead vessel, presumably the Vengeance, was a study in controlled violence. Its hull was scarred with what looked like battle damage, yet every system read as fully operational. Weapon ports lined its sides like the teeth of some ancient predator, while sensor arrays swept space with mechanical precision. Commander, Science Officer Venta called out, her voice tight with concern. I'm detecting massive energy signatures from those ships. Their power output exceeds anything in our databases. What manner of beings are these Terrans? Before Lyrith could respond, the communication array crackled to life again. The same harsh voice from before, but this time accompanied by a visual signal. The main display flickered and resolved into the image of a creature that made the entire Zephyrian crew take an involuntary step backward. The being that appeared before them was clearly a predator species. It stood upright on 2 legs, its body covered in some form of artificial skin that might have been clothing or armor. But it was the face that truly unsettled them, forward-facing eyes set in a skull that spoke of pursuit and violence, with bony ridges that suggested powerful jaw muscles. When it spoke, they could see rows of teeth designed for tearing flesh. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran destroyer Vengeance, the creature said, its voice carrying an authority that seemed to resonate in their bones. We've identified 3 hostile vessels targeting your position. Are you in immediate danger? Lyrith forced herself to respond, though every instinct screamed at her to flee from this predator. I am Commander Lyrith of the Zephyrian research vessel Gentle Current. Yes, we are under threat from Korthak raiders. They will destroy us if we do not surrender. The human's expression changed, and something that might have been a smile crossed its features. The gesture was terrifying, a baring of teeth that in any sane universe would be a threat display. Understood, Commander. We'll handle this. Please maintain your current position and prepare for possible debris. The communication cut out, leaving the Zephyrians staring at the now dark screen. Prepare for debris? What did that mean? They didn't have long to wonder. The 4 Terran ships had spread out into what was clearly an attack formation, their movements coordinated with military precision. The Korthak vessels, apparently realizing they faced unknown opposition, began to maneuver for combat. The Korthak are hailing the Terran ships, Kethel reported. Should I translate? Yes, Lyrith replied, morbid curiosity overcoming her fear. The harsh, guttural language of the Korthak filled the bridge. Unknown vessels, you interfere in Korthak business. Withdraw immediately or face destruction. This prey belongs to the Empire. The response from the Terrans was immediate and chilling in its simplicity. Captain Chen's voice carried no emotion, no anger, just cold professional competence. Negative. You will cease hostile actions and withdraw immediately. This is your only warning. The largest Korthak ship, a battle-scarred veteran with kill markings along its hull, responded by opening fire. Plasma bolts lanced across space toward the lead Terran vessel. The kind of firepower that could crack a planet's crust. What happened next would be burned into Lyrith's memory forever. The Terran ship didn't even try to dodge. Instead, some form of defensive system activated around its hull, creating a shimmering barrier that absorbed the plasma bolts without apparent effect. At the same time, the Vengeance returned fire with weapons that defied comprehension. Streams of metal projectiles traveled at incredible velocities, tearing through the Korthak ship's shields as if they were paper. The kinetic impact alone was devastating, but these projectiles carried secondary charges that detonated deep within the enemy hull. The proud Korthak raider simply came apart, its armored sections spinning away in all directions. Impossible, Venta breathed. The kinetic force alone should have been absorbed by their shields. How did those projectiles penetrate? The remaining 2 Korthak ships tried to flee, but the other Terran vessels had positioned themselves perfectly. What followed was not a battle, but an execution. The humans fought with a cold efficiency that spoke of countless conflicts, their ships moving in perfect coordination as they systematically dismantled their opponents. One Korthak ship attempted to ram the nearest Terran vessel in a desperate suicide attack. The human ship simply accelerated toward the collision, firing continuously until the enemy craft was reduced to debris and vapor. The Terran vessel passed through the expanding cloud of destruction without slowing. Within minutes, it was over. 3 Korthak ships had been reduced to expanding debris fields, and the 4 Terran vessels hung in space like patient predators, their weapons still tracking for additional threats. The communication array activated again, and Captain Chen's face reappeared on their screen. If anything, the human looked slightly disappointed, as if the brief battle had been insufficiently challenging. Hostile vessels have been neutralized, she reported in the same professional tone she might use to announce the completion of routine maintenance. Commander Lyrith, are you injured? Do you require assistance? It took Lyrith several moments to find her voice. We are unharmed, Captain Chen. I must ask, what are you? Your species is unknown to us. And your capabilities. She gestured helplessly at the debris fields where moments before 3 warships had existed. The human's expression softened slightly, and when she smiled this time it seemed less predatory and more protective. It was difficult to read the expressions of such an alien face. We're humans, Commander. We come from a planet called Earth, and we're relatively new to this part of the galaxy. As for our capabilities, she paused, seeming to consider her words carefully. Let's just say we've had a lot of practice dealing with hostile species. We received your distress call and came as quickly as possible. Practice dealing with hostile species, Kethel muttered, his tentacles still trembling. Commander, their planet must be a nightmare world to produce such efficient predators. Captain Chen apparently heard the comment, because her smile widened slightly. Actually, Navigator, Earth is quite beautiful. Perhaps you'd like to see it sometime, but first we should get you to safety. There may be more Korthak ships in the area. Lyrith realized she was still staring at the debris fields. Entire crews of Korthak warriors, beings who had terrorized this sector for generations, had been eliminated in minutes by these unknown humans. The implications were staggering. Captain Chen, she said carefully, we are grateful for your assistance. But I must ask, what brings Terran ships to this remote system? Surely this cannot be a chance encounter. The human's expression became unreadable, and when she spoke, her voice carried undertones that suggested depths of meaning the Zephyrians couldn't begin to fathom. Commander, We've been tracking Korthak expansion patterns for some time now. Let's just say we have a vested interest in preventing certain types of behavior. Consider this the beginning of a very important conversation. The docking bay of the Terran destroyer Vengeance was a testament to functional brutality. Commander Lyrith and her small diplomatic party moved carefully through corridors that seemed designed for beings twice their size. Everything built with the assumption of conflict and the need for rapid repair. The walls were lined with what appeared to be armor plating, and every junction was designed to be defensible. The atmosphere is compatible with our needs, Science Officer Venta observed quietly, her bioscanner discreetly analyzing their surroundings, though the oxygen content is higher than optimal for extended exposure. Navigator Kethel's tentacles curled nervously as they passed a group of human crew members. The beings moved with predatory confidence, their eyes automatically tracking the alien visitors with an alertness that spoke of constant readiness for threat. Commander, observe how they carry themselves. Even in their own ship, they remain vigilant. Captain Sarah Chen waited for them in what she called the briefing room, a stark chamber dominated by a massive display screen, and surrounded by workstations that could accommodate the ship's senior staff. When the Zephyrians entered, they were surprised to find they weren't alone. 3 other humans were present, each representing a different aspect of their species' approach to the universe. Commander Lyrith, welcome aboard, Captain Chen said, rising from her seat. The gesture revealed her full height, which was intimidating even by the standards of larger species. Allow me to introduce my colleagues. This is Dr. Marcus Webb, our xenobiologist and first contact specialist. Dr. Webb was older than the captain, with graying hair and eyes that held a keen intelligence. When he spoke, his voice was gentler than Chen's military tones. It's an honor to meet you, Commander. Your species' biotechnology is fascinating. I've been studying your ship's readings, and the integration of living systems with mechanical components is extraordinary. The second human was introduced as Commander Elena Vasquez, the ship's intelligence officer. She was smaller than the others, but carried herself with a coiled tension that reminded Lyrith of certain aquatic predators from her homeworld. Commander Lyrith, we need to discuss the Korthak situation. Your encounter today was not isolated. The final human was perhaps the most unsettling. Major Jake Morrison stood with the bearing of a warrior, his body bearing what were clearly scars from previous conflicts. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had seen violence and survived it. The Korthak Empire has been expanding aggressively for the past 2 years. They've enslaved or destroyed 17 different species in that time. Lyrith felt a chill run through her aquatic nervous system. 17 species. The number was staggering. How is this possible? Surely the Galactic Confederation would intervene in such obvious aggression. The humans exchanged looks that spoke volumes. It was Dr. Webb who answered, his tone carrying a mixture of sadness and anger. Commander, we've discovered that the Galactic Confederation has been aware of Korthak expansion for quite some time. Unfortunately, they seem to consider it an acceptable loss as long as core worlds remain safe. The mathematics are quite clear, Commander Vasquez added, activating the room's display system. A 3-dimensional map of local space appeared, showing Korthak territorial expansion over time. At current rates of expansion, they'll reach Confederation core systems within 5 years. But apparently that's far enough in the future that no one wants to take action now. Lyrith studied the map with growing horror. The red zones indicating Korthak control spread like an infection across entire sectors, consuming peaceful civilizations that had never known war. This is unconscionable. How can civilized beings allow such atrocities? Because most civilized beings have never had to fight for their survival, Major Morrison said bluntly. They've become soft, reliant on diplomacy and negotiation with species that respect neither. The Korthak understand only strength, and most Confederation members have forgotten what strength looks like. Captain Chen leaned forward, her expression serious. Commander, I need you to understand something about humanity. We come from what you might call a death world. Our planet has been shaped by constant conflict, natural disasters, and evolutionary pressure that demanded adaptability and aggression for survival. Every human on this ship has been trained from childhood to fight, Dr. Webb added. Not because we're naturally violent, but because our history has taught us that peace is only possible when good people are willing and able to defend it. The display changed to show Earth, and Lyrith gasped at what she saw. The planet was beautiful, with blue oceans and white clouds, but the surface readings were terrifying. Massive storm systems that could strip flesh from bone, tectonic activity that regularly reshaped continents, and temperature variations that would kill most known species. "Your planet is actively trying to kill you," Venta whispered, her scanner barely able to process the violent environmental data. "Every day," Captain Chen confirmed with what might have been pride. "We evolved alongside apex predators, survived ice ages, volcanic winter, asteroid impacts, and countless wars. It made us tough, but it also made us protective of those who can't protect themselves." Commander Vasquez manipulated the display to show recent Korthak attacks. The images were difficult to watch. Peaceful settlements reduced to ash, refugee ships destroyed while fleeing, entire civilizations erased from existence. "We've been tracking their expansion for months, gathering intelligence and preparing countermeasures." "Countermeasures?" Lyrith asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Major Morrison's smile was particularly predatory. "The Korthak Empire is about to learn why you don't threaten species under human protection. We've been building a coalition of worlds they've threatened, providing training and equipment to those willing to fight back. And for those who can't or won't fight," Captain Chen added, "we've been positioning rapid response fleets, like the one that responded to your distress call." The implications began to sink in for the Zephyrian delegation. These humans, these Deathworld predators, had taken it upon themselves to police an entire sector of space. They had the technology and the will to do what the Galactic Confederation could not or would not do. "Captain Chen," Lyrith said carefully, "what exactly are you proposing?" "We're offering protection, Commander. Not just for your ship, but for your entire species. The Korthak will eventually reach Zephyrian space, and when they do, your peaceful nature will make you easy targets." Dr. Webb stepped forward, his expression earnest. "We're not asking you to become warriors. That's not who you are, and we respect that. But we are asking you to accept our protection, and perhaps assist us in ways that align with your nature. Your biotechnology is incredibly advanced," Commander Vasquez explained. "Medical applications, environmental systems, communication networks. There are ways you could contribute to the defense effort without compromising your principles." Lyrith looked at her companions, seeing her own uncertainty reflected in their expressions. The humans were offering protection, but at what cost? What did it mean to accept the guardianship of a species that had clearly evolved to be apex predators? "We would need to consult with our government," she said finally. "This is not a decision I can make alone." "Of course," Captain Chen agreed. "We'll provide escort back to Zephyrian space. But Commander, I want you to understand something. We're not going away. The Korthak expansion ends here one way or another. The only question is whether peaceful species like yours choose to be part of the solution or remain victims of the problem." Major Morrison activated a final display, showing the positions of human fleets throughout the sector. There were far more than Lyrith had imagined, positioned at strategic points throughout local space. "We've been preparing for this for 2 years, Commander. The war is coming whether the Confederation acknowledges it or not. We're just making sure it's fought on our terms." As the meeting concluded and the Zephyrians were escorted back to their ship, Lyrith found herself wondering if they had been rescued or simply discovered by a more sophisticated form of predator. The humans spoke of protection and cooperation, but everything about them screamed danger to her peaceful instincts. Yet as she thought about the casual efficiency with which they had destroyed the Korthak raiders, she realized that perhaps the galaxy needed such predators. The universe was not a safe place, and sometimes it took monsters to fight monsters. 3 weeks after their encounter with the humans, Commander Lyrith found herself in the ornate chambers of the Zephyrian High Council, watching her people's leaders struggle with concepts their peaceful evolution had never prepared them for. The chamber itself was a work of art, its flowing organic architecture designed to promote harmony and contemplation. Bioluminescent panels cast gentle light that shifted with the emotional state of the speakers, creating an environment where conflict was nearly impossible to sustain. "The humans want us to become accomplices to violence," declared Councillor Merhan, his elderly form trembling with indignation. "Our entire civilization is built upon the principles of peaceful coexistence. We cannot simply abandon our nature because we face threats." Elder Thalis, the most senior member of the council, raised one graceful hand to restore order. Her ancient eyes held wisdom accumulated over 2 centuries of life, but also a weariness that spoke of difficult decisions ahead. Lareth, tell us again what you observed of these humans. Leave nothing out, particularly regarding their intentions toward our people. Lyrith activated the chamber's bio-neural display system, causing the walls to come alive with three-dimensional recordings from her encounter. The brutal efficiency of human warfare played out in perfect detail, causing several council members to recoil in horror. They eliminated 3 Korthak warships in under 4 minutes, she reported, her voice steady despite the traumatic memories, not through superior numbers or overwhelming firepower, but through tactical precision and weapons technology that defies our understanding of physics. Their projectile weapons somehow bypassed energy shields entirely. Barbaric, muttered Councillor Vithara, to destroy life so casually, without even attempting negotiation or compromise. With respect, Councillor, Lyrith replied. The Korthak had already demonstrated their hostile intent. They were preparing to destroy our ship and crew. The humans responded to an immediate threat. Science Officer Venta, who had been granted permission to address the Council, stepped forward with her analysis. Honored elders, I have studied the tactical recordings extensively. The human response was not casual destruction but precisely calibrated force. They targeted weapon systems and structural weak points to minimize casualties while maximizing effectiveness. The display shifted to show the aftermath of the battle, where human search and rescue vessels had moved through the debris fields. They also immediately began searching for survivors among the Korthak crews. This is not the behavior of mindless predators, but of beings who understand the value of life even among their enemies. Elder Thalis studied the recordings with keen interest. And their offer of protection? What did you sense of their true motivations? They spoke of coalition building, Lyrith replied. Not conquest or domination, but alliance among species threatened by Korthak expansion. They seem genuinely committed to preserving peaceful civilizations, even if their methods are, she searched for the right words, incompatible with our nature. The council chamber fell silent as the members contemplated this paradox. The humans were clearly predators, evolved for violence and conflict, yet they had traveled across unknown distances to protect strangers from a threat that posed no immediate danger to their own people. There is something else, Venta added reluctantly. I have been in communication with scientific colleagues throughout the sector. The humans have made contact with 17 different species in the past month. In every case, they have offered the same protection, asked for the same cooperation, and demonstrated the same restraint in their use of force. Councillor Mirhan's bioluminescent patches flickered with agitation. 17 species? They are building an empire of their own, using the Korthak threat as justification for expansion. No, came a new voice from the chamber's entrance. The council turned to see Navigator Kethil entering with what appeared to be a human companion. The alien was tall and lean, wearing the simple blue uniform that seemed standard for their diplomatic corps. I present Ambassador David Park of the Terran Federation, Kethil announced formally. He has requested permission to address the High Council directly. The human stepped forward with careful, measured movements that seemed designed to appear non-threatening. When he spoke, his voice carried the same controlled authority Lyrith had observed in Captain Chen, but with additional undertones of respect and diplomacy. Honored elders of Zephyr, I come before you not as a conqueror or a recruiter, but as a representative of a species that has learned the hard way that freedom requires eternal vigilance. We offer our protection not because we seek to control you, but because we have seen what happens when good beings do nothing in the face of evil. Elder Thalis leaned forward, her ancient eyes studying the human with intense curiosity. Ambassador Park, your species' reputation for violence precedes you. How can we trust beings whose first response to conflict is destruction? Because, Elder, we know the cost of that violence intimately, Park replied, his voice heavy with emotion. Every human on our ships has lost someone to war. We fight not because we enjoy it, but because we refuse to allow others to suffer as we have suffered. The display activated again, this time showing images that made the Zephyrians gasp in horror. Cities reduced to rubble, refugee camps filled with displaced families, mass graves that spoke of systematic extermination. But these were not recordings of alien worlds. They were from Earth's own history. We did this to ourselves, Park said quietly. For thousands of years, we fought each other over resources, ideology, territory, and pride. We perfected the art of warfare because we had no choice. It was evolve or die. But eventually we learned that our true enemy was not each other, but the cycle of violence itself. The images you see are from our past, he continued. When we finally achieved peace on our own world, we swore that we would never allow such atrocities to occur again. Whether on Earth or anywhere else, we had the power to prevent them. Counselor Vithara's voice was barely a whisper. You carry the weight of your entire species' suffering. We carry the responsibility that comes with power, Park corrected gently. We have learned to be weapons in the service of peace. It is a burden we accept so that others do not have to. The chamber fell silent as the council processed this revelation. The humans were not conquerors seeking to expand their territory, but guardians shaped by their own traumatic history into protectors of those who could not protect themselves. What exactly are you asking of us? Elder Thalis inquired. Nothing that compromises your nature, Park assured her. Your biotechnology could revolutionize medical care for refugees, improve life support systems on evacuation vessels, and enhance communication networks across the coalition. You would save lives, not take them. And in return, you would be protected from Korthak aggression, included in our intelligence networks to receive advance warning of threats, and given access to technologies that could improve life for your people. Most importantly, you would help us preserve the peace that your species represents. Lyrith watched the council members exchange glances, their bioluminescent patterns shifting as they engaged in the rapid, non-verbal communication unique to their species. Finally, Elder Thalis spoke for them all. Ambassador Park, we will need time to consider your proposal. The decision to align ourselves with warriors goes against everything our species has believed for millennia. Of course, Elder, but I must respectfully point out that time is something we may not have in abundance. Our intelligence indicates that Korthak forces are massing for a major offensive. The window for peaceful preparation is closing rapidly. As if summoned by his words, an urgent chime echoed through the chamber. A young aide burst through the entrance, his patterns flashing in panic. Elders, forgive the interruption, but we have received an emergency transmission from the Veltar system. The Korthak fleet has arrived. They are demanding complete surrender within 6 hours, or they will begin orbital bombardment of civilian centers. The council erupted in horrified whispers. The Veltar were another peaceful species, philosophers and artists who had never known war. They were 3 days' travel from Zephyrian space at maximum velocity. Ambassador Park activated a communication device, speaking rapidly in the harsh human language. Within moments, he turned back to the council with grim determination. Elder Thalis, I have ordered the 3rd Human Fleet to immediate deployment to Veltar space. They will arrive in approximately 18 hours. But I need to ask you a direct question. Will the Zephyrian Council stand with us in defense of the innocent, or will you wait until the Korthak arrive at your own worlds? The chamber fell completely silent. Outside, the gentle sounds of Zephyrian society continued their peaceful rhythm, unaware that their representatives were about to make a decision that would define their species' future. Elder Thalis looked around at her colleagues, reading the subtle color changes in their bioluminescent displays. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of unanimous decision. Ambassador Park, the Zephyrian Federation accepts your alliance. May the depths preserve us all for what we are about to become. The Veltar homeworld hung in space like a jewel, its surface covered in crystalline cities that caught and refracted its star's light into brilliant rainbows. From orbit, the planet appeared to be made of living glass, each structure grown rather than built, following organic patterns that spoke of a species that valued beauty above all else. Commander Lyrith watched from the bridge of the human destroyer Defiance as the 3rd Human Fleet took defensive positions around the threatened world. Never seen anything like it, muttered Captain Rodriguez, the Defiance's commanding officer. She was younger than Captain Chen, but carried herself with the same predatory confidence that seemed universal among human military personnel. Intel says the Veltar don't even have a word for weapon in their language. Admiral Sarah Chen, who had been promoted to fleet command following the rapid expansion of human operations, stood before the main tactical display studying Korthak fleet positions. 12 massive battleships surrounded by twice as many support vessels had taken position just outside the system's edge. Close enough to threaten, but far enough to retreat if necessary. Status report, Chen ordered, her voice carrying easily across the bridge. All ships report ready. Admiral, came the reply from her tactical officer. The vengeance, retribution, justice, and defiance are in close orbit. Harbinger, Reckoning, and Judgment are positioned at the system's outer edge to prevent Korthak retreat. Supporting vessels are spread in defensive grid formation. Lyrith noticed the pattern in ship names and found it deeply unsettling. Every human vessel seemed to be named after concepts of retribution and justice, as if their entire species was dedicated to some cosmic settling of accounts. Veltar planetary defense status? Chen inquired. Non-existent, Admiral, reported the intelligence officer. They have orbital platforms for asteroid deflection and space traffic control, but nothing that could be classified as military hardware. Population centers are completely exposed. On the display, the crystalline cities sparkled innocently in the sunlight, their inhabitants presumably going about their daily lives, while unaware that their entire civilization hung in the balance. The Veltar had been contacted by human diplomats but had politely declined to evacuate, stating that abandoning their homeworld would be worse than death. Incoming transmission from the Korthak fleet, the communications officer announced. On screen, Chen ordered. The main display shifted to show the bridge of a Korthak battleship, its dark metal corridors lit by harsh red light. The being that appeared was clearly a high-ranking commander, his scaled hide marked with ritual scars that indicated numerous victories. When he spoke, his voice carried the arrogance of a species that had never known defeat. I am War Commander, Thakmor of the Korthak Third Conquest Fleet. You will withdraw your vessels immediately or be destroyed alongside the prey species you seek to protect. Admiral. Chen stepped forward, her expression calm and professional. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation Navy. You are ordered to withdraw from Veltar space immediately. This system is under our protection. The Korthak commander's laugh was a harsh sound that spoke of contempt for all life forms he considered inferior. Terrans. Another prey species seeking to play at war. Your 7 ships against my 30. The mathematics are quite clear. The mathematics, Chen replied with what might have been a smile, are about to become very interesting. You have 60 seconds to begin withdrawal before we open fire. You dare threaten the Korthak Empire? Thakmor snarled. We have conquered 17 species and enslaved billions. Your pathetic fleet will become another trophy in our victory halls. The transmission cut off, leaving the human bridge in tense silence. Lyrith watched Admiral Chen's face, noting the subtle changes in expression that indicated the transition from diplomacy to warfare. It was like watching a predator prepare to strike. All ships, battle stations, Chen ordered. Execute Pattern Omega. Target priority is enemy command vessels. Remember, we're protecting 3 billion innocent beings down there. The human fleet moved with mechanical precision, each ship taking position according to some predetermined plan. The Korthak response was immediate and overwhelming. 30 warships began advancing into the system, their formations designed to maximize firepower concentration while minimizing target exposure. Enemy fleet entering weapons range, reported the tactical officer. They're targeting our forward vessels. Let them come, Chen said quietly. Maintain formation until they commit to their attack vectors. The space around Veltar suddenly erupted in violence. Korthak plasma cannons lanced across the void, their energy discharges powerful enough to crack moons. The human ships responded not by evading but by accelerating directly into the enemy fire, their defensive systems absorbing punishment that should have destroyed them. Shields holding at 90%, came the damage report. Enemy fire is less effective than projected. Lyrith stared at the display in amazement. The Korthak weapons that had destroyed her people's ship with casual ease were barely scratching the human vessels. How is this possible? Adaptive armor, Captain Rodriguez explained without taking her eyes off the tactical display. We study every enemy we face, learn their weapon signatures, and develop countermeasures. We've been tracking Korthak energy patterns for months. The human fleet reached optimal firing range and unleashed hell. The kinetic projectiles that had so easily destroyed the raiders that threatened the gentle current were revealed to be the smallest weapons in the human arsenal. Massive railgun systems fired projectiles the size of shuttlecraft at significant fractions of light speed, while missile systems launched self-guided warheads that seemed to bend space around them. The lead Korthak battleship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was a kilometer-long monument to military engineering, the next it was an expanding cloud of superheated debris. The ship beside it lasted slightly longer, its shields managing to deflect the first salvo before being overwhelmed by the second. By the flowing depths, Lyrith whispered. Your weapons don't just penetrate their defenses, they ignore them entirely. Physics is physics, Admiral Chen replied calmly, while watching her fleet systematically dismantle the Korthak formation. Energy shields work by deflecting or absorbing directed energy weapons. They're useless against solid projectiles moving at relativistic velocities. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 18 minutes. 30 Korthak vessels, the pride of their conquest fleet, were reduced to expanding debris fields with surgical precision. The humans had lost exactly nothing, not one ship, not one life, not even significant shield strength. War Commander Thakmor's flagship, one of the last ships remaining, attempted to flee the system. The human ships that had been positioned at the outer edge intercepted it with contemptuous ease, their weapons disabling its engines and leaving it drifting helplessly in space. Open a channel to the Korthak command ship, Chen ordered. The display showed the enemy bridge in ruins, smoke and sparks indicating massive system failures. Thakmor himself was badly injured, his scarred hide marked with fresh wounds from the destruction of his fleet. War Commander, Chen said in the same professional tone she had used throughout the engagement, your fleet has been neutralized. You will surrender immediately and prepare to be taken prisoner. Any attempt at self-destruction will be prevented. The Korthak commander stared at her with hatred and something that might have been fear. Impossible. No prey species possesses such power. What are you? We are humanity, Chen replied simply. And you have just learned why peaceful species like the Veltar don't need to be warriors. They have us. As human boarding parties prepared to secure the disabled Korthak vessels, Lyrith found herself struggling to process what she had witnessed. The humans had not simply won a battle. They had demonstrated complete technological and tactical superiority over an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for years. Admiral, she said quietly, how many fleets like this one do you have? Chen turned to look at her, and for the first time, Lyrith saw something other than professional competence in the human's eyes. There was sadness there and resignation and a burden that seemed to weigh on her entire species. Enough, Chen replied. As many as necessary to ensure that what happened here today never needs to happen again. That's the promise we made to ourselves and to every peaceful species in the galaxy. On the surface of Veltar, 3 billion crystalline beings went about their lives unaware that they had just been saved by monsters who chose to be guardians. In the vast darkness of space, the human fleet began the process of securing prisoners and recovering intelligence that would help them prepare for the next inevitable confrontation. The Korthak Empire had just learned that the galaxy was no longer theirs to conquer. They simply didn't know it yet. The great assembly hall of the Korthak Empire had been carved from the living rock of their homeworld's largest mountain, its vast chambers designed to intimidate and inspire fear in equal measure. Massive stone pillars rose into darkness above, each one decorated with the skulls of conquered species, while the floor was inlaid with precious metals, stripped from the treasuries of 17 different civilizations. It was here that Emperor Gaktar the Terrible held court, surrounded by the war commanders who had built his empire on the bones of the weak. Today, that empire faced its first real threat in over a century. Explain to me again, the Emperor snarled, his massive form hunched on a throne made from the fused armor of enemy warships, how 30 ships of the Third Conquest Fleet were destroyed by 7 vessels of an unknown species. War Commander Thakmor knelt before the throne, his scarred hide bearing fresh wounds from his defeat at Veltar. Around him, the assembled war leaders maintained careful silence, each one understanding that their own fates hung in the balance of this conversation. My Emperor, Thakmor began carefully, the Terrans possess technology beyond our current understanding. Their weapons penetrate our shields as if they were not there. Their defenses absorb our most powerful attacks without significant damage, and their tactical coordination suggests a level of military sophistication we have never encountered. Excuses, growled General Vakthul, the Emperor's chief military advisor. 30 ships against 7. Even if these humans had superior technology, the numerical advantage should have been decisive. You were not there, Thakmor replied, his voice carrying the weight of trauma. I have fought in 47 battles, conquered 12 worlds personally, and never seen anything like their weapons. They fired solid projectiles that somehow moved faster than our energy weapons could track. When they struck our ships, the projectiles didn't just penetrate. They passed completely through our hulls and exited the other side, leaving perfectly cylindrical holes. Emperor Gaktar leaned forward, his predatory eyes fixed on his defeated commander. And their numbers? Intelligence reports suggest these Terrans have multiple fleets operating throughout our expansion zone. At least 20 ships confirmed, possibly more, Thakmor admitted. They appear to be working with a coalition of prey species, offering protection in exchange for technological cooperation. The Zephyrians, Veltar, and Kethamori have all formally allied with them. The Emperor's roar of rage echoed through the chamber, causing several junior officers to take involuntary steps backward. The Korthak Empire had spent generations conditioning subject species to fear them, building their power on the certainty that resistance was futile. The idea that peaceful civilizations might find protectors was a threat to the very foundation of their society. "How many ships can we deploy against them?" he demanded. General Vakthul consulted his tactical displays. The 4th and 7th Conquest fleets are available for immediate deployment. Combined, they represent 85 vessels of various classes. The 2nd and 5th fleets are engaged in the Outer Rim campaigns but could be recalled within 10 days. And their defensive capabilities? Unknown, my Emperor. The humans appear to operate from mobile fleets rather than fixed bases. Our intelligence networks have been unable to locate their homeworld or primary staging areas. Emperor Gaktar rose from his throne, his massive form casting shadows across the assembled war leaders. "Then we will draw them out. Order the 4th and 7th fleets to begin systematic attacks on their allied worlds. Start with the weakest. Force them to spread their forces thin, defending multiple targets." "My Emperor," interrupted Intelligence Commander Morgak, "there may be strategic considerations we should discuss. The humans have demonstrated unusual restraint in their military actions. They could have executed our captured crews, but instead have taken them prisoner. This suggests they may be open to negotiation." The suggestion was met with absolute silence. The concept of negotiating with prey species was so alien to Korthak, thinking that several commanders appeared genuinely confused by the proposal. "You suggest," the Emperor said with deadly quiet, "that the Korthak Empire should treat with inferior beings as equals. I suggest, my Emperor, that these beings may not be inferior. Their technology, their tactical capabilities, their apparent industrial capacity, all evidence points to a species that may be our equal or superior in military capability." "Impossible," General Vakthul declared. "No prey species could develop such technology. They lack the predatory instincts necessary for advanced warfare." War Commander Thakmor looked up from his position of submission. "General, with respect, I have seen their capabilities firsthand. These humans are not prey species. They are apex predators who have chosen to protect others. That makes them far more dangerous than any enemy we have previously faced." The assembled war leaders began murmuring among themselves, their voices carrying undertones of concern. The Korthak military doctrine was based on intimidation and overwhelming force applied against inferior opponents. The concept of facing an equal or superior enemy was something they had never seriously considered. "Enough," the Emperor commanded, restoring silence to the chamber. "The Korthak Empire has conquered 17 species and enslaved billions. We will not be stopped by a handful of ships from unknown space. General Vakthul, you will personally command the combined 4th and 7th fleets. Your objective is the complete destruction of these human vessels and the subjugation of all species under their protection." "My Emperor," the general replied, "what are our rules of engagement regarding human prisoners?" "There will be no prisoners," Gaktar declared. "These humans have humiliated the Empire. They will serve as an example to any other species that might consider resisting our expansion. Destroy their ships, eliminate their crews, and leave their bodies floating in space as a warning." As the war leaders dispersed to carry out their Emperor's commands, Intelligence Commander Morgak lingered behind. When the chamber was empty except for himself and the throne guard, he approached carefully. "My Emperor, I feel compelled to point out that we know almost nothing about human industrial capacity or reserve forces. If their 7 ships could destroy 30 of ours, what might happen if they possess larger fleets?" Emperor Gaktar's laugh was a harsh sound that echoed off the stone walls. "Then we will build more ships and recruit more soldiers. The Empire has survived for 3 centuries by adapting to threats and overwhelming them with superior numbers. These humans will be no different. And if they have allies we haven't discovered yet, If this Terran Federation represents more than just scattered fleets, then we will conquer them all, the Emperor replied with absolute certainty. The strong survive and the weak serve. This is the way of the universe, and no amount of technological superiority can change that fundamental truth. As Morgak withdrew to begin his intelligence gathering, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Empire was about to make a catastrophic mistake. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that suggested a completely different approach to warfare, one based on technological superiority and tactical precision, rather than brute force and intimidation. But the Emperor had spoken, and the Korthak war machine began to mobilize. Within hours, 85 warships were moving toward human-protected space, their crews confident in their numerical superiority and their Emperor's strategic wisdom. None of them had bothered to ask the most important question. If the humans could deploy 7 ships capable of destroying 30 Korthak vessels, what might they do when faced with 85? In the depths of space, automated monitoring stations began detecting the massive energy signatures of the Korthak fleet movement. The data was transmitted instantly to human command centers, where analysts studied the enemy formations with professional interest. The Korthak Empire was about to learn the difference between fighting prey species and challenging apex predators. The lesson would be written in fire and vacuum, and it would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. The Kepler station hung in the void between star systems, a massive construct of metal and ceramic that served as the primary staging area for human fleet operations. Commander Lyrith had never seen anything like it, a fortress the size of a small moon, bristling with defensive systems and surrounded by a constant flow of ships arriving and departing. The scale of human military infrastructure was staggering, suggesting an industrial capacity that dwarfed anything the known galaxy had imagined possible. "Welcome to Kepler Station," Admiral Chen said as their shuttle approached the main docking bay, command center for Terran Federation operations in this sector. Population 200,000 military personnel, 50,000 civilian contractors, and about 10,000 diplomats representing 47 different species. Lyrith studied the massive structure through the shuttle's viewports. "How long did it take to build something like this?" 6 months, Chen replied casually. "We have 12 more under construction at various locations throughout the galaxy. When humans decide something needs to be built, we build it." The docking bay alone was larger than most space stations, capable of accommodating vessels from the smallest courier ships to massive dreadnoughts. As their shuttle settled onto the landing platform, Lyrith could see the controlled chaos of a major military operation, ships being loaded with supplies, crews being briefed for deployment, and the constant movement of beings from dozens of different species. "The Korthak fleet will reach the Outer Rim colonies in approximately 18 hours, Chen explained as they made their way through corridors that buzzed with activity. 85 ships, including some of their heaviest battleships. Intelligence suggests this is their response to our intervention at Veltar. They entered what humans called the Strategic Command Center, a vast chamber dominated by a 3-dimensional display showing the entire local galaxy. Red indicators marked Korthak fleet positions, blue showed human forces, and green represented allied worlds. The scope of the conflict was immediately apparent. Dozens of fleets moving across hundreds of light years, with the fate of billions hanging in the balance. "Admiral Chen," called a voice from across the chamber. Lyrith turned to see a human she didn't recognize wearing the insignia of a fleet commander. "Field Marshal Harrison is requesting your presence for the final strategic briefing." The briefing room contained the most terrifying collection of beings Lyrith had ever encountered. 24 human military officers, each one carrying themselves with the controlled lethality she had come to associate with their species. At the head of the table sat Field Marshal David Harrison, a man whose scars spoke of personal experience with violence on a scale that defied imagination. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber, "the Korthak Empire has committed 85 ships to what they believe will be a decisive strike against our coalition forces. Intelligence indicates they intend to target civilian populations to force our fleets into defensive positions." The main display showed the approaching Korthak Armada, a massive concentration of firepower moving inexorably toward peaceful worlds that had never known war. Beside it, smaller displays showed human fleet positions, 7 task forces positioned at strategic points throughout the threatened region. Our response will be Operation Righteous Fury, Harrison continued. Simultaneous strikes against all Korthak fleet elements using coordinated hyperspace jumps. Total force commitment, 347 vessels across all task forces. Lyrith felt her biological systems freeze in shock. 347 ships. The humans had hidden the true scope of their military capabilities, allowing potential enemies to underestimate their strength while building an armada capable of projecting power across the entire galaxy. Admiral Chen, your first fleet will take point against the main Korthak formation. Admiral Rodriguez commands the second fleet against their flanking elements. The remaining task forces will eliminate support vessels and prevent retreat. Rules of engagement? Asked one of the commanders. Total destruction of all Korthak military assets, Harrison replied without hesitation. Any ship that surrenders will be accepted as prisoner, but we will not allow a single vessel to escape and report our true capabilities to their homeworld. Another officer raised her hand. Civilian casualties on targeted worlds? Zero tolerance. Any Korthak commander who targets non-combatants will face immediate retaliation against their homeworld. We've made this clear through diplomatic channels. They choose to ignore the warning at their own peril. As the briefing continued, Lyrith began to understand the true scope of what she was witnessing. This wasn't just a military operation. It was the complete dismantling of an aggressive empire by beings who had evolved specifically to wage war. The humans weren't just protecting their allies. They were permanently eliminating a threat to galactic peace. Field Marshal, she said during a brief pause, what happens after the Korthak fleet is destroyed? Their empire still controls dozens of worlds and millions of ships. Harrison turned his attention to her, and she was struck by the weight of responsibility in his eyes. Commander Lyrith, the Korthak Empire ends today. We have been preparing for this moment for over a year, gathering intelligence and positioning assets throughout their territory. When their fleet is destroyed here, simultaneous operations will begin against their infrastructure, their shipyards, and their command centers. You're going to invade their entire empire? We're going to liberate 17 enslaved species and ensure that the Korthak can never again threaten peaceful civilizations, Harrison corrected. This is not conquest, it's justice. The briefing concluded with detailed tactical assignments, and Lyrith found herself assigned to Admiral Chen's flagship as an observer. As the human officers dispersed to their commands, she remained behind with Harrison. Field Marshal, may I ask you something? Of course. Your people speak of justice and liberation, but you're about to unleash destruction on a scale that will reshape the entire galaxy. How do you reconcile such violence with your stated desire for peace? Harrison was quiet for a long moment, staring at the tactical display that showed the approaching storm. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of decisions that would affect billions of lives. Commander, my species learned long ago that there are some evils that cannot be negotiated with, cannot be reasoned with, and cannot be allowed to exist. The Korthak Empire is built on suffering and sustained by cruelty. Every day we delay action, thousands more beings die in their slave camps. He gestured to the display showing Korthak territorial expansion. In the past year alone, they have destroyed 3 civilizations completely, not conquered, destroyed. Entire species erased from existence because they resisted enslavement. We tried diplomatic contact, offered them opportunities to reform their practices, even provided humanitarian aid to worlds they had conquered. And their response? They executed our diplomats and sent us recordings of the torture sessions. They wanted us to know that mercy was weakness, that peaceful species existed only to serve their expansion. Lyrith felt a chill run through her aquatic nervous system. So you decided to eliminate them. We decided to save everyone else, Harrison corrected. The Korthak made their choice long before we arrived in this galaxy. They chose to be monsters. We're simply ensuring they never get the chance to make that choice again. As alarms began sounding throughout the station, indicating the beginning of fleet deployment. Harrison offered her a slight smile that somehow managed to be both terrifying and reassuring. Commander, in 12 hours, the galaxy will be a safer place for your children and the children of every peaceful species. The price of that safety is the complete destruction of those who threaten it. It's a price humanity is willing to pay. Through the massive viewports of the command center, Lyrith watched as the human fleet began its final deployment. hundreds of ships moving with deadly purpose, each one carrying crews who had volunteered to become instruments of justice for beings they had never met. The Korthak Empire had ruled through fear for centuries. Believing that strength alone determined survival, they were about to learn that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the willingness to protect others at any cost. In the depths of space, two philosophies of existence prepared for final confrontation. Only one would survive to shape the galaxy's future, and Lyreth found herself praying to the depths that it would be the monsters who chose to be guardians, rather than the predators who chose to be tyrants. The age of Korthak terror was ending. The age of human protection was about to begin.